Do you ever find yourself unclear on exactly what the difference between mixing and mastering is? If you're learning music production, it's vital that you understand the difference between these two stages of the music production process. Or if you're a musician looking to get your music released, it's important that you understand the difference between mixing and mastering so you know what to expect, so you know what needs to be done before your music can get released, and so you don't waste any time or money. You may find engineering services for your music that offer mixing or mastering. Some engineers offer both, but you need to know the difference between the two so you know what you need to get your music release ready. So in a nutshell, mixing is the process that comes after the recording and editing stage. The goal when mixing is to make all of the tracks that you've recorded in sequence sound good together, and then to combine them into one single audio track that has all of the elements of the song. Mastering is then a separate process that comes after the mixing stage. In this stage, you'll be bringing in your mixed audio file, you'll be making a few subtle tweaks to add a final layer of polish to the song, and then also the level or volume of the track is brought up to an industry standard so that it sounds right when played against other tracks in a streaming playlist or on the radio, for example. Now that's essentially what the difference is between mixing and mastering, that's what they are. Let's dive a little deeper to get a better understanding. The mixing stage normally begins once all of the tracks have been recorded and edited. So the mixing engineer, whether that's yourself or if you're outsourcing, they'll have all the tracks in front of them on their digital audio workstation, the drums, the bass, the vocals, etc. And then these tracks need to be balanced in a way that means every instrument is heard, the amount that it should be heard, nothing is too overpowering in the mix, and it just generally sounds exciting to the listener. Roe Ozaki details 5 domains that a mixer must control and work within in order to achieve this balanced mix. The first is the frequency domain. The audible frequency spectrum ranges from 20 Hz to 20,000 Hz. We hear these as bass or low end in the low end of that frequency spectrum, the mids in the middle, and the treble or the highs in the top end of that spectrum. By using EQ and other tools, the goal when mixing is to create a balanced frequency response across the mix. So for example, at the start of your mix, you may find that the low end in general is very overpowering. So by using EQ, you could cut out a lot of the low end from the tracks other than the kick drum and the bass and achieve a more balanced frequency response overall. I'm not going to go into too much detail about how to use these techniques and how to mix and master. I'm going to leave a bunch of links in the description below so you can find out more if you want to dive deeper into that. For this video, we're just going to be looking at what mixing and mastering are. The second domain is the level domain. So tracks don't want to be too loud to be overpowering to the other tracks, and also they don't want to be too quiet so you can't hear them. Ultimately, it's about getting a relative balance across the mix. This is largely subjective, it depends on the song and it depends who's mixing it, but ultimately everything needs to be heard at the level that it was intended to be heard at. Also, if things get too loud, then nasty digital distortion can occur if things are too loud for your system to handle. The third domain is the stereo domain. That's the perceived stereo width of the mix. Tracks need to be placed either centrally or to the left or to the right. Generally, the aim is to keep the most important parts of the mix in the center and balance everything else around it. So for example, you'd probably have the vocals in the center, the main vocal, and then you might want to pan backing vocals slightly left or slightly right to stop them from masking each other. And there are plenty of interesting techniques that a mixing engineer can do with this. They might want to move things around the stereo field over time using automation to keep the mix exciting. The fourth domain is the depth domain. Now this depth is only a perceived depth. Again, after all, the sound is coming from the same 2 speakers. But by using techniques and tools like reverb, level balancing and panning, instruments can be mixed in a way that makes it sound like some of them are very close to you and some are more distant. For example, a mixer may want to mix as though the lead vocal is very up front and in your face, and the backing vocals come across as being further back on the stage. And the final domain is the time domain. So the length of notes and phrases, the length of reverb tails, and the song in general. All of this can be modified within the mixing stage to help guide the listener and again make for a more interesting mix and prevent masking. Then once the mix is ready, it can be bounced down into a single audio file. Now, technically at this stage, the music could be released, but for it to sit comfortably next to other songs in a streaming playlist or on the radio, the levels should be brought up to an industry standard and any rough edges should be polished. A few tweaks might need to be made. And that's when the mastering stage comes in. So you've got the finalised mixed track in front of you, now it's time to get it mastered. If you've mixed the track yourself, you may want to master it yourself as well if you're learning to do that too. Or you may want to send it to a mastering engineer to give an unbiased opinion, a second pair of ears, and to make use of their niche expertise in that field. If you're a musician who wants to get your music ready for release, then consider which mixing engineer you're going to hire and which mastering engineer you're going to hire. Now, some engineers will do both, so just do your homework, listen to examples of their mixing and mastering, and you'll be able to find the right engineer for you, whether that's two separate engineers or the same person. The mastering process will go something like this. So the finalised mixed audio track is brought into a completely new DAW session. The engineer will listen to the track, focusing mainly on the busier sections, and then some subtle tweaks will most likely be made. Now, probably only 3 to 5 plugins are going to be used for the mastering stage, unlike potentially dozens that you might find within a mix. Mainly, the mastering engineer is going to need EQ, compression or multiband compression, a limiter, and also potentially some tape saturation, tape emulation sort of plugin. They may find that the overall mix is lacking in a little top end, or there's a certain problematic frequency, and some small EQ changes can sort this right out. And then applying a compressor on the mix as a whole can really help to glue things together and soften out those peaks ready for limiting to help achieve a louder overall level. Multiband compression is very useful here when mastering. Multiband compression, if you're not sure, is a tool that allows you to compress certain frequency ranges. So for example, if only the top end needs compressing, then a multiband compressor will allow the engineer to only compress the top end and leave the rest alone. Tape emulation may be used here as well to help glue the track together, give it a little bit of an analog feel to it. The engineer may even consider analog summing, which is where they'll put the mix through an actual piece of analog hardware for a similar kind of effect. And the icing on the cake here is the limiter. Basically, all masters are going to need a limiter to stop the track from clipping and giving that nasty digital distortion that we talked about. And also it can be used to bring the levels up to a industry standard for streaming or radio or CD. So to sum up, mixing and mastering are both very different processes, but they're both vital in making a record. Now, if you want to learn more about how to mix and how to master, I'm going to leave a bunch of links in the description below to get you started. And I post new videos right here on this channel at least every other Tuesday. I've thrown a few bonus videos in there as well, teaching you how to record, mix, master, edit your music. So feel free to subscribe if you want to learn more. And hit me up in the comments section below. Let me know what that one thing that you really want to learn most about mixing or mastering is. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.